With the 2019 NFL Draft right around the corner, the run-up to the festivities has officially turned into the season that I like to call mock draft hell. Every analyst from every major or minor media outlet will throw out several different variations of projections on how they believe the first round of the NFL Draft will turn out. And they won't stop for what seems like years. I've seen countless of them. Yet I, like many of you, still consume them all with injected into my veins level addiction. Whether it's a mock draft that includes nothing but trades from front to back, a best-worst case scenario for each team, or a projection using insider information, the variations keep coming and I keep reading. It's borderline insanity. But one style of mock draft that I've rarely seen, if ever, is one that takes into consideration what the fans want their teams to do. One that each and every fan can read and not despise like their ex-significant other. The NFL Draft is around the corner and soon the Broncos will be on the clock. Don't miss out on any news and analysis. Take a second to sign up for our free Broncos newsletter, delivered 3 times daily. Using this factor as a baseline, I've spent the past 10 days searching countless mock drafts on multiple different websites, looking into the comment sections for guidance. After what seemed like close to 300 articles and 10,000 comments consumed, this is my attempt to give the fans what they want. Something that every fan of every team can get behind. A truly fan-driven mock draft. Let's get started. This was one of the hardest selections I had to make, and we've only just begun. There is a strong faction of Cardinals fans that are opposed to taking Kyler Murray with the top overall selection, opting for edge Nick Bosa or DL Quinnen Williams to bolster a struggling defensive front. But the overall course of the conversations I read had the Cards dethroning last year's top selection Josh Rosen in favor of the athletic Sooner signal caller. The Cliff Kingsbury connection to Murray has some real smoke behind it, and Murray seems like a perfect fit for what the Cardinals could be doing on offense next season. I chose to follow the smoke. Other options mentioned: trade down Niners fans' dreams come true, and their top overall defensive player falls into their laps after the Cards pass on Bosa. Even if Bosa does go first overall, fans think they are in great shape as a great interior pass rusher is still on the board in Alabama's Quinnen Williams. There was some great conversation about whether Williams or Bosa would be a better fit given the past selections of Eric Armstead, DeForest Buckner, and Solomon Thomas along the defensive line, but the majority of information I was able to gather lead to the selection of an elite edge rusher. Other players mentioned: FSU edge Brian Burns, trade down. One thing that I didn't consider in this exercise is any trade scenario. And if given the opportunity, Jets fans would rather trade down than make a selection at No. 3 overall. Given the massive trade-up for QB Sam Darnold last season, I can understand why. Without projecting any trades, I chose to go with a great need fit in one of the top-mentioned players in Kentucky's Josh Allen. A rather interesting theme developed when perusing Jets blogs. Many Jets fans truly believe that Allen is the top edge defender in the draft based on his ability to drop back into coverage, and would rather select him than Nick Bosa should both players be available based on this notion. Other options mentioned: Alabama DL Quinnen Williams, arguably the top talent in this year's class. Quinnen Williams fits a huge need for the silver and black. This is a defensive front that has several holes from front to back, and a quality pass rusher from anywhere along the front seven would be a great pick at 4. There was a strong contingency that was pushing for Houston DL Ed Oliver at 4 should Williams be off the board, and another that was pounding the table for LB Devin White out of LSU. I chose to go with Williams to truly satisfy the need and want for the best defensive player available. Other options mentioned: Kentucky edge Josh Allen. Devin White was unquestionably the highest mentioned player for Bucs fans. The loss of Quan Alexander has hurt their defense dearly, and getting an elite run and pass defender for the middle of their front seven seems to be the direction of the overall conversation surrounding 5 overall. I did run into a great article highlighting the need to fill the potential void left by Gerald McCoy, as there is uncertainty surrounding the future of the supremely talented interior defensive lineman. McCoy wants a new contract, and the Bucs seem to be hesitant to give in to his demands. Quinnen Williams is their pipe dream, but Ed Oliver seemed to be a constant consolation prize to the pewter crew. Other players mentioned: Alabama OT Jonah Williams. This was another hard selection to make because there are a lot of Giants fans that really want to address the pass rush with their top overall selection. Quinnen Williams and Ed Oliver were other popular names, but the need to get a quarterback of the future is still the biggest need for the Giants. With other, highly mentioned names already off the board, I chose to go with arguably the top passer in this year's draft and a name that is highly connected to the Giants. Though there were constant mentions of unnamed pass rushers here, Dwayne Haskins fits the bill of the best player available at a position of need, even if that need is in the future. Other players mentioned: Oklahoma QB Kyler Murray, Kentucky edge Josh Allen. As I was going through the Jaguars blogs, I ran into a great thread asking for everybody to use either the Draft Network, Fanspeak.com, or WalkTheMock.com to build their ideal 7th-round mock draft for the Jaguars. While there were a few mentioning Ed Oliver or Iowa TJ Hawkinson, the overwhelming selection for pick 7 was edge defender, with Burns, Mississippi State's Montez Sweat or Kentucky's Josh Allen at the forefront. With Allen already off the board, I chose to go with the want for an edge rusher and take Brian Burns for the Jaguars. Hawkinson would be a great addition for newly signed QB Nick Foles, but tight ends rarely go in the top 10. The value isn't there. I chose Burns over Sweat because of the majority of mentions in these mock draft scenarios. Other players mentioned: Florida OT Jawan Taylor. One of the most intriguing prospects in the draft falls into an almost perfect fit as Lions fans take Oliver off the board. This is a dream scenario for Lions fans, and other than Quinnen Williams, Ed Oliver was one of the most constantly mentioned players on their websites. Detroit fans understand the need to bolster their pass rush capabilities, which is even further accentuated by the loss of Ezekiel Anza in unrestricted free agency. Edge rusher was a constant theme because of this, but Oliver's versatility against the run or the pass makes this selection all the more worthwhile. Other players mentioned: Mississippi edge Sweat, Florida State edge Burns, Iowa Hawkinson. One of the largest needs to fill for the Bills has to be the protection of QB Josh Allen, and Bills fans are well aware of it. Jonah Williams is arguably the most versatile offensive lineman in the draft, capable of playing all 5 positions depending on which draft nick you choose to frequent. Williams and Florida OT Jawan Taylor were largely mentioned amongst the conversations I read, as well as the need to add to the pass rush to take pressure off of aging veteran Jerry Hughes. There was also a faction pounding the table for Ole Miss WRDK Metcalf, for obvious reasons. Metcalf's downfield ability combined with Allen's massive arm strength is a juicy combination, and the need to stretch the field vertically exists in Western New York. Other players mentioned: Clemson DL Christian Wilkins. The Broncos find themselves in an interesting situation here. Primary defensive targets White, Oliver, and Williams are off the board already, and they have just traded for QB Joe Flacco. As I said in an earlier selection, tight ends rarely go inside the top 10, so the positional value of Hawkinson isn't quite there at this point. A name that has been linked to the Broncos since early December, Drew Lock, fills a future need at the face position of the NFL. I did reach out to ask a lot of Broncos fans who they would take given the way the board has fallen, and Lock was the primary target, with an honorable mention to Michigan LB Devin Bush. There are 2 primary needs for the Bengals this coming season, and Devin Bush fills what is widely considered as the largest amongst their fans. There were a lot of comments bringing up the need to address the offensive tackle position, but the overwhelming consensus was selecting Bush so that the Pittsburgh Steelers and Baltimore Ravens couldn't. Despite rumors of the Bengals possibly trading up for a quarterback, I rarely found mentions of fans wanting the team to do so. In letting the board come to them, they've lined up with the best player available at a position of need, as well as a couple of offensive linemen like Washington State's Andre Dillard or Florida's Jawan Taylor, who are also widely mentioned. In what I thought to be a surprise, Packers fans are all about adding to the edge pass rush with their top first-round selection, opting to wait for a receiver or tight end until their second first-round selection. Offensive linemen were scattered throughout the mock draft articles I read, as well as T.J. Hawkinson. But the one resounding theme that surfaced was the want to add another pass rusher into the fold. Montez Sweat was the most highly mentioned player at that position. From what I could gather when reading Dolphins fan pages, the main theme suggests filling voids along both sides of the trenches. Whether that's adding an offensive tackle or a pass-rushing defensive lineman doesn't matter. They just want the help up front. I chose to go with Christian Wilkins here because he was a highly mentioned player and also the top player available at a multitude of needs along Miami's defensive line. I did also see a lot of mentions for Wilkins' teammate Clelin Ferrell to be the new edge rusher of the future, as well as trading up for a QB. Adding a natural run-stuffing defensive lineman to the mix is a high priority for Falcons fans, and they get a massive specimen at number 14. Dexter Lawrence, who has some off-field issues stemming from a failed ped test late last season, is a huge addition to a defense that severely struggled against inside rushing attacks last year. All pun is intended. A lot of Falcons fans are hoping for Ed Oliver to fall to their first-round selection, as well as Lawrence's teammate Christian Wilkins. With both of them already off the board, this highly mentioned player is a natural fit and selection for the ATL. I also saw a ton of comments suggesting a third Clemson DL player. With newly signed QB Case Keenum in tow, the one resounding message I could gather from Redskins fans was that they absolutely, positively did not want to trade up for a QB. Period. In fact, unless one of Drew Lock or Kyler Murray were able to fall to the middle of the first round, Redskins fans would much rather address the edge pass rush in the first round. With top names like Montez Sweat, Brian Burns and Ed Oliver off the board, I chose to go with Clelin Ferrell here. A ton of the quick mock drafts that I could dig up had Ferrell mentioned at 15, and I feel like it's a little rich for the other edge defenders that I found, as well as the fit with the upcoming swarm of offensive linemen. Adding protection for Cam Newton has to be a main priority for the Panthers front office, and Panthers fans are in staunch agreement for a high selection on a pass protector. Several names along the offensive line, including local prospect Garrett Bradbury, were thrown around at will. While there is a small commitment to adding to the defensive line and helping the pass defense, a lot of the top names at the edge position are already off the boards here. With Michigan's Rashawn Gary a common name mentioned, I struggled to make a decision at this position, but the call for an offensive lineman was too strong. Andre Dillard was the pick. This was one of the few selections that I decided to interact with the comment sections, choosing to actually reach out and ask what Giants fans would like to do here at 17. I was at a loss, with prior mentions of adding to the pass rush in mind as well as the dissent amongst the bunch on whether to target a QB or an OL with their second selection in the first round. This was a difficult decision. After a short discussion with a few people, it was clear that they would like the Giants to target Jawan Taylor over Rashawn Gary, as they viewed this mauling right tackle prospect as a potential top 10 selection. Though, the selection of Dwayne Haskins at pick 6 did get some chaffing from these fans. You just can't please them all. The Vikings have struggled all across the offensive line for a couple of years now. Despite the addition of Josh Kline in free agency, there is a major need to add to a unit that has been in a state of flux for the past 3 seasons. Cody Ford, who was constantly mentioned in both the first and second rounds of the mock drafts I found, is a versatile player capable of lining up at right tackle of either of the guard positions. Depending on what the Vikings choose to do with Riley Reiff, there are whispers about moving him inside to play guard. Ford can man the position vacated. There was one major theme surrounding the Titans at 19th overall, and it was adding to the interior of the offensive line. Specifically, Titans fans are all about adding Garrett Bradbury with their top selection to make up for the loss of Josh Kline in free agency. Despite other mentions of a top receiving prospect to help Marcus Mariota, whether at tight end or at wide receiver, scattered throughout the websites I searched through, I chose to go with the highest mentioned player here. Bengals fans' logic behind taking Devin Bush at 11 is certainly on point, because Steelers fans desperately want Bush to replace Ryan Shazier as the man in the middle of their defense. But with Bush off the board and a collective dissent upon which cornerback would be the better addition at 20, I went with a trendy selection at the tight end position. Most Steelers fans think that T.J. Hawkinson will already be gone when they go on the clock, so even though he wasn't as highly mentioned as the cornerback position, he was a constant within the mock drafts I could dig up. Replacing and upgrading the loss of Jesse James seems to be a want for Steelers fans, so why not go with the best player on the board? This was a difficult selection to make, in large part because I struggled to find draft-related content and comment sections willing to participate. As odd as that sounds, there aren't a lot of Seahawks fans joining in the discussion as of late. The few comments that I did come across largely mentioned Rashawn Gary as an addition to a weaker pass rush, as well as adding to the offensive line. With top names Cody Ford and Andre Dillard already off the board, Gary was the natural selection here. Wide receiver and edge rusher. Those were the selections most prominent on the minds of Ravens fans at 21. There were a few mentions about adding to the offensive line here, specifically targeting the versatile Cody Ford as a potential replacement for Marshall Yanda as he progresses towards retirement. However, with the need to add weapons to the offense to help second-year starter Lamar Jackson, DK Metcalf and teammate A.J. Brown dominated the conversation. All of the mentioned pass rushers were already off the board here, so we see the uber-athletic Metcalf taken, even though there may be some dissent from Ravens fans that want a more refined route runner. Deshaun Watson was sacked more times than any QB last season, so predicting an offensive lineman for the Texans was incredibly easy to do. However, for this selection I chose to jump into a conversation surrounding the cornerback class to see if adding a coverage player would be on the minds of Texans fans. Giving up a little information as to how this project was heading, the very first response was to sprint to the podium to select Greedy Williams, followed by several more repeating the notion. Finding a player that can fill the void left by Kareem Jackson is a high priority, and Greedy fits what they want as far as pass coverage. Raiders fans are mostly in agreement that their first four selections, all of which fall inside the top 35, have to be two pass rushers, a cornerback, and an offensive weapon. This is where it gets tricky, because all of the mentioned pass rushers were already taken, and the discussion went in several different directions as to which offensive weapon was the bigger need or value here. I chose DeAndre Baker here because as a top cornerback and massive need for the Raiders, he was regularly mentioned at both of their late first-round selections. Iowa tight end Noah Fant, Alabama RB Josh Jacobs and Ole Miss WR A.J. Brown were thrown around a lot as well. Get the high-value position first, and see who falls. There was a very interesting conversation surrounding the Eagles taking a safety to fill a future need at the position, but nobody involved could come to a general consensus as to which player they would like to target in the first round. Mentions of Florida's Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Delaware's Nasir Adderley dominated this discussion, but mostly as second-round players to target should they fall. The one player that continued to surface in other discussions was Jerry Tillery, a dominating interior defensive lineman. Adding help to the interior of the defense that can both stuff the run and offer some pass-rushing chops is a common thought from Eagles fans, and Tillery offers added health value where Mississippi State's Jeffrey Simmons does not. Getting an edge rusher at some point in the draft is a high priority for Colts fans, even though they added Justin Houston in free agency. Pass rushing has been at an almost literal standstill for the Colts over the past several years, and this class offers a wide number of solutions. But with the top names already off the board, the discussion shifts to the offensive side of the football. Adding a weapon to a rising offense, particularly in the passing game, and helping Andrew Luck is a common theme. There was a great debate over the value of Alabama RB Josh Jacobs here, but most felt that incumbent starter Marlon Mack and the running back by committee approach made them comfortable enough to target a pass catcher like A.J. Brown instead. Raiders fans get their offensive weapon here, and he sure is a good one. Last year's starter Jared Cook left behind a career year and also a massive hole over the middle of the field. Noah Fant is an almost perfect replacement as a pass catcher, and an uncanny resemblance of a blocker as well. With their first three selections filling massive needs at great value, the Raiders can focus their attention to the second round without having to reach for any major need. Another pass rusher and a quality running back could be on the docket there, as many Raiders fans were pining for Josh Jacobs once again. Fortify the trenches. Specifically, a right tackle and a two-gap run-stuffing defensive lineman. Those are the directions that Chargers fans want their team to head in, and the value of Risner is just that. Sam Tevi, a backup-turned-starter at right tackle late last season, simply isn't going to cut it for Chargers fans. Getting Dalton Risner, who is the premier run-blocking right tackle in this class as well as a quality pass protector, was a resounding message on Chargers fan boards. Though there was a lot of love for Notre Dame DL Jerry Tillery or Mississippi State's Jeffrey Simmons, I chose to go in the direction of protecting QB Phillip Rivers, who isn't getting any younger. Chiefs fan discussion mostly stems from the successful offense that dominated the NFL last season, one that may even get better with the growth of third-year QB Patrick Mahomes. While the loss of Mitch Morse to free agency brings up discussions of drafting an interior offensive lineman capable of playing center, those wishes are better served in the tail end of the second round. On the other side of the football, there is a drastic need to upgrade in the secondary. Byron Murphy was a constantly mentioned name here, as were LSU's Greedy Williams and Florida's Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. There wasn't a general consensus on who to take, however, Sky chose Murphy over other potential needs like interior and exterior pass rusher. The value is too good here. Another addition to the defense, Nasir Adderley brings a single high center fielder presence for Packers fans and added relief to second-year cornerback duo Jaire Alexander and Josh Jackson. Adding help to the offensive line here was a topic of discussion, as well as adding a wide receiver to a core of guys that is relatively unknown save for Devontae Adams. Another trendy selection for the Packers was Alabama LB Mack Wilson. Wilson popped up several times in conversations, but most felt the need to address the back end of the secondary or fortify the offensive line were better selections. This selection might come with some grief from Rams fans, but it makes a lot of sense at this moment. Pairing Jeffrey Simmons with Aaron Donald would offer a truly devastating duo of pass rushers from the interior of Wade Phillips' defense. Ndamukong Suh is still on the free agent market, so there is a need to fill that void. However, Simmons is coming off of a torn ACL and won't be available to the NFC champions for most, if not all, of 2019. Some Rams fans would rather address the back end of the secondary and target Chauncey Gardner-Johnson here, or tack on Dalton Risner to play right tackle. In the end, I'm going with a future need on a stacked roster and giving a top 10 talent to a Super Bowl contender. Patriots fans are worried about their receiver depth, and feel the need to target a top-rated pass catcher towards the top end of the draft is necessary. N'Keal Harry, who is a hell of a route runner, would fit into Josh McDaniels' scheme tremendously and take the burden off of Super Bowl MVP Julian Edelman. Also, with the retirement of Rob Gronkowski last week, Irv Smith Jr. and Jay Sternberger were highly mentioned players for the Patriots. One thing that I noticed more often than not were the trade scenarios being thrown around at will. Whether it's a trade up for TJ Hawkinson or a trade out of the first round, Patriots fans don't believe they will be making the 32nd overall selection. Given Bill Belichick's draft history, I'd say that is a fairly safe bet.